Hello, Andrew.
Hello there. How are you?
I am doing very well. Welcome. We'll give everybody a little bit of time to join.
Very cool. My first time, so I'm figuring out the ropes.
Excellent. Well, we're glad to have you. And I love your haircut.
Thank you. So what do we do? Stick our name in this table?
Please.
Ooh.
So whereabouts in the world are you coming from today?
Brisbane, Australia.
Oh, very nice.
Whereabouts are you?
I am in beautiful Columbus, Ohio in the States. I used to work with Red Hat Product Security, and I had a ton of teammates in Brisbane and Sydney and Perth, and so all over down there.
I lived in Mountain View, California for about 7 years. But I've been back in Australia almost 10 years now, so it's a while ago.
It is a part of the world I very much want to visit someday.
I don't mind it here.
That's what all my mates from down there always said. I don't mind it down here.
I enjoyed my time in California as well.
Yeah. California can be an interesting place.
Spooky, the spooky ghost.
Yes. Ooh.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Hey, hey.
Oliver, aren't you in are you in Australia or are you in California?
I'm in Australia, same as Andrew.
Right.
Put a link to our agenda in the chat if you want to go ahead and just mark your attendance. And if you have any items you want to discuss today, any opens, please add them. And I got just a brief little agenda we'll march down.
I have to leave in 30 minutes from 7 minutes ago. So
we could talk about your thing first.
Yeah, perfect. Man, somebody's got some Cherry MX reds on that clicketiness.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh no.
Did I peg it right? Are the Cherry MX reds?
No, I actually don't remember what these are. I think they're some kind of white switches. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah. I had to downgrade my keyboard when COVID started to something less clickety because my fiance was being driven absolutely nuts. She was like, "You cannot do this." And then I tried throwing little O-rings on the keyboards, and she's just like, "It's still bad. It's still bad. You got to do something else." So I think this is a brown.
It's just interesting how Google Meet clearly does noise cancellation really well and Zoom doesn't, because I've never heard all of his keyboard.
Well, I'm very sad. I used to have a giant 107 key IBM keyboard. I ripped off a dying mainframe, and I had all these dongles to convert it to eventually USB, and eventually this thing gave up the ghost. But I missed that thing. It was like way.
You are dating yourself if you're pulling keyboards off of mainframes.
Well, like it or not, mainframes run a lot of the world, unfortunately.
Yeah.
IBM,
are they? My first job was as a mainframe operator.
Yeah.
Hey, there's a reason why Modern added support for COBOL. as one of their early languages they developed, because there's a lot of COBOL out there. So
Mhm.
yeah.
All
I
right.
can make some Bitcoin as a COBOL maintenance program.
All right. Do you want me to dive in and just cover my stuff real fast?
Well, let's first off do some introductions, and then we will dive into the auto fix. So I'm
Oh.
Crow. I am the facilitator for the Vulnerability Disclosure Working Group and other nonsense here at the OpenSSF. Been the working group liaison for nearly 3 years, and I'm excited to have the opportunity to work with our friends overseas and get some better inclusion and points of view. And honestly, to finally get a chance to have a dialogue with the OSV folks, I'm super excited. So you want to introduce yourselves?
You go first, Oliver.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Oliver. I lead the OSV team here in Sydney. Yeah, so I think I've attended a couple of these meetings in the past, but unfortunately they were all at rather early hours, so haven't been able to show my face as often. So thank you very much for setting this up.
Very welcome.
I'm Andrew. I work with and for Oliver. Joined the team mid last year, so I'm quite new to the whole everything space, right? So I'm very interested to learn more about how we interact with the OpenSSF and what this working group is looking to achieve and stuff like that.
Excellent.
Expect lots of questions from me. Good.
Questions. My name is Jonathan Lightshoe. I am the senior software security researcher for Project Alpha Omega under the OpenSSF, under the Linux Foundation. It's like a great tree. Yeah. So I formerly the Dan Kaminsky Fellow, and you guys have met me both. You guys have both met me. All of you have met me before, so you all know who I am.
I don't know who you are.
What? Yeah.
I've never met you. What is Alpha Omega? Don't know anything. See, questions.
You don't know what Alpha Omega is?
No.
Really? Alpha Omega
Take
is
it away.
the is two sides of Alpha Omega. The Alpha is focused on critical projects, so paying for audits of critical software like jQuery and Node and all of those things. And then Omega is focused on the long tail of open source. So finding and fixing vulnerabilities at scale across open source. And so my work is focused on and has been focused on automating generating pull requests at scale across open source. And I was looking for a home for that so I was the Dan Kaminsky Fellow last year. And I spent my summer working on that project, spoke about it at Black Hat, DEF CON, B-Sides Las Vegas, trying to find a home for it. A company that will go nameless had a hiring freeze as a part of that. So I continued my search and ended up finding myself over here at the Linux Foundation, and I'm quite happy to be able to get my opportunities to continue to scale this work. So yeah, so that's Alpha Omega. And as a part of that, I'm doing primarily two things, and this dovetails into why I'm bringing up these two topics. One, since I'm the security researcher for Project Alpha Omega, I will also be doing a lot of security research, finding vulnerabilities at scale, and hopefully reporting those vulnerabilities. And as a part of that, we need a disclosure policy. And so I wrote up and submitted to this working group for review. I'll put this up I'll bring it up here in the meeting notes. A for review proposal, which is a vulnerability disclosure policy for the Open Source Security Foundation. And it's basically a copy and paste of Google's policy plus a like heavily modified. So it's like it's the Open Source Security Foundation's heavy modification of Google's Project Zero policy at a high level. So yes, and that has currently got a lot of review feedback that I need to go back through, but I'm still looking for more feedback. So please don't hesitate to have a look at that and give it a look.
Cool.
I posted some relevant links about the Alpha and Omega project in the meeting notes. If you're curious to read more, there's a GitHub repo and a very pretty website.
Yes.
I found the page linked off the OpenSSF website, so I'll go and school myself on that.
Yep.
Cool.
Oh Lord, there's a lot of feedback on this thing.
Right.
It's a multicolored multicolored palette of words. So I doubt, have you either of you read it? I've sent it into the working group. If either of you have read it, I'd love, and you want to provide feedback, feel free. Otherwise, feel free to read it and provide feedback either in the document, in the Slack channel, or next meeting.
I only discovered the Slack channel for this working group earlier this week. I'm a bit of a Slack noob. So.
Perfect. Second topic. Okay. Second topic. We are in the process of establishing a SIG under the Vulnerability Disclosures Working Group focused on the topic of automating vulnerability fixing. So this is going to pull in players like Modern, Open Refactory. There was like 65,000 pull requests generated by an organization to fix a tar slip vulnerability in Python across the open source ecosystem. So they did a bunch of automated pull requests. So trying to pull in all the different players that are engaged in automating, fixing vulnerabilities at scale, to create a SIG focused on that topic and creating some norms, some best practices, some here's how to not get banned by GitHub, sort of things, and also like how to not piss off maintainers. So that meeting is within your time availability potentially. It will be starting next week at 4 p.m. Eastern on Wednesdays. I don't know if that's still too. I don't know if that's too early for you.
2 hours before this.
Yeah, it's 2 hours before this.
So that'd be what, about 8 for you folks?
Yeah. So
yeah, it's but daylight savings will unfortunately kick in, and that will make that work.
Yeah, but it's there, and I know that Google has engaged in some. I know somebody from Google engaged in the big project to go fix like Apache struts across open source, and so this sort of work is not something that Google is unfamiliar with. So if there's someone at Google that is interested in engaging in this project, feel free to send this SIG over their way. And there's an issue for it under the Vulnerability Disclosure Working Group. I think it's issue number 123, which is very convenient. So yeah, easy to remember. So do either of you have any questions about the SIG, about automating vulnerability fixing at scale, yada yada yada?
And I'm interested in just sort of learning a bit more about it, and obviously over the passage of time, because we're thinking about what sort of end-to-end vulnerability management stories we can sort of have there. So and this sounds like it dovetails into that quite nicely. So I'm interested in following along.
Awesome. And our modus operandi here in the working group is our meeting notes are all in a Google Doc, and those are typically posted. They're pinned to the top of each Slack channel. So if you navigate to a different working group, that's typically where you can look to see the agenda. And the agenda should have meeting times, Zoom links, links to the repo, mailing lists. So any of the kind of the details around that group are typically at the top of the agenda, which is posted at the pinned at the top of Slack.
Awesome.
And most folks will use a GDoc when there's a heavy a thing that needs heavy collaboration. So I need to have like 8 people rewording like Jonathan's policy, for example. And then eventually, once it's stable, we move everything into a markdown file in a GitHub repo, and then everything's managed with issues and PRs from that point forward. Once we're past the heavy editing.
Iterating on it. Yeah. That sounds cool.
Yeah. So, how much do either of you know about the working group? I can kind of talk about what we've done in the past and what we're working on today, in addition to what Jonathan mentioned. Do you want to get a little recap on kind of where things are for the working group?
I think that'd be quite helpful for us.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, thank you.
No, not at all. I will dump a link to our repo, which is at the top of the agenda, but right there is our GitHub repository. So the goals of this working group are to promote coordinated vulnerability disclosure practices within the open source ecosystem. We predominantly have done that through participation in kind of standards bodies, commenting. We had some vigorous dialogue in the past with the CVE board, which I'm sure will pick back up eventually. But our main work outputs have been 2 coordinated vulnerability disclosure guides. One is focused on upstream projects and maintainers. So a maintainer or a project could take this guide and kind of cherry pick the things that they like and incorporate into their own project of how they want to manage vulnerabilities. And it gives some guidance on how to work with security researchers. Our second guide was focused on security researchers on how they can better interact with upstream and open source communities. So those were things those are both published in the repo. We have OSV, Oliver popped in many times back in the past, and unfortunately things have drifted. So I'm excited to have an opportunity to kind of re-engage with you guys. Our current projects are the 2 ideas that Jonathan mentioned, and he also has a couple other issues that we want to kind of deal with as part of the working group. But we're now working on a CVD guide focused on open source consumers. So how they can understand how upstream works and how issues get fixed and how they're shared back and forth amongst the community and downstream. So hopefully that's just kicking off, and that's going to be a collaboration with the end user working group, who's they're focused on consumers. So we're going to be collaborating with them. And right now we're in kind of the requirements gathering phase, where we have a stub of a document and we're just kind of filling out a table of contents. And then from there, we'll kind of divide up the labor. And Jonathan might go write something about where upstream reports vulnerabilities. So he might have something about the National Vulnerability Database or GSV. What's Bresser's project?
Oh, GSD?
GSD.
Global Security.
Yeah. So maybe Jonathan might write that. And I and Jonathan, the other Jonathan from the end user working group, maybe we'll kind of write the introduction, kind of coaching consumers on things to look for, how to, you should use scorecards or All-Star for evaluating your dependencies. And ideally, these projects have the ability to write advisories. So basically, we're going in the requirements gathering, and eventually we'll start divvying up the work to get the document written. Our other active project is an idea called the OSS CERT. So the open source security incident response team. I didn't write securities in there twice. This is part of the mobilization plan that was released a year and a half ago by the foundation, where they said, if you invest in these 10 areas of open source security, you'll be able to kind of uplift the posture of the whole ecosystem. And one of those ideas was staffing a group of IR professionals that would help facilitate whatever maintainers or security researchers needed. So if a researcher needed help contacting a project, that group would help facilitate that. If a project needed help negotiating timelines or working with a researcher, the CERT potentially could help out with that. Or if they need help writing an advisory or accessing tools, we would help kind of make those connections and help get these projects set out so they can have their own kind of vulnerability handling process themselves. That plan is, there's a link to it in our Git repo. It's a kind of a 3-stage plan. And that actually has been reviewed by the Technical Advisory Committee. And we've had, I believe now 5 members that thought this was a good idea, and they voted to recommend it to the governing board to consider for funding. So I was in a call earlier today with the governing board trying to figure out how the hell all that works. But eventually we'll be presenting the plan to the governing board, and they'll be potentially funding a team of experts that will be doing incident response for upstream. And then we might go ask organizations like Google or Intel, could you help, volunteer somebody from your PCERT for so many hours a month or for the year, or whatever, however it works out. We're still kind of ironing out all those details. So that's our other kind of big project that the group's working on. Any questions about any of the guides or the CERT?
Rob, do you want an invite to the SIG meeting explicitly?
Please.
To which of your emails?
Email to my Gmail, please.
Okay. Do either of you want explicit invites to this meeting?
When is this one?
It's 4 p.m. Starting March 1st bi-weekly, which is a Wednesday. Eastern, starting Eastern, so 8 a.m. Australia.
Chuck, feel free to send me one whether I come or not. I'll figure out whether I'm.
Can you drop your emails into the Zoom chat so I can copy and paste them?
Yeah.
Same for me, please.
Yeah, and the nice thing about OpenSSF is all of our meetings are recorded. So if you miss one or you want to monitor something that is out of your time zone, you can watch all the videos on YouTube. And again, everyone publishes their meeting notes so that you can be able to kind of read back through, and everyone should have Slack and a mailing list that you can engage with the community there kind of asynchronously as well.
Oh God, so everyone can look at my silly questions on YouTube later on.
Yes.
Hi, people watching my silly questions later on.
we have, dozens of people that look at all the videos.
Terrifying.
Who in technology doesn't want to watch somebody else's meeting?
I know. I ended up watching back one of the vulnerability disclosures meetings because I was like, I wonder if XYZ was said or if like there was a vote taken, and I rewatched it and I was watching myself talk and I'm like, oh my God. First off, my audio is terrible in the pickup, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm sorry you're all here. I need to do something to make this room less echoey, clearly.
So that's kind of where the working group is today. I would love to hear about OSV and how we can kind of partner more together going forward.
Yeah, I actually dropped the agenda item as well, so it's a convenient segue to that.
Awesome.
Yeah, so so as you know, we've been working on the OSV schema, collaborating with GitHub mostly on this, and select parts of the community in getting the OSV schema to its current state. And it's gotten a fair bit of adoption from various different open source ecosystems. So GitHub is using it. We've got Go, we've got Python, Rust. The Global Security Database is also using it as one of its formats. And I think there's a lot of overlap with this working group. So we're not so far as like OSV so far doesn't really cover the early disclosure piece of the kind of vulnerability lifecycle. Like it's more focused around organizing vulnerability data in a consistent and usable way, and then helping the downstream users make use of that in an automated way. Yeah, so there's been a number of updates. We've also worked with the CVE board. So the latest CVE 5.0 standard actually includes this new version versioning schema, which was we directly proposed to them and they accepted. And the idea is that it's very much aligned with how OSV does it, so that there's a lot of great overlap in terms of interrupt when it comes to that. And hopefully that's a dialogue we'll continue with them. I know you mentioned you've had some conversations with the CVE board in the past. We're also trying to contact them. We're finding that sometimes they're not as responsive as we'd like. So I do wonder, yeah, I think there's a few areas of collaboration around potential helping promote OSV as a schema for open source, and also potentially re-engaging with the CVE board to help the improvements that we're driving across open source more generally push that back into CVE to begin with. Andrew, anything you want to add to that? You're muted if you're talking.
You're on mute. Yeah, I just remember we were drawing the line between OSV schema stuff and infra stuff. I guess without getting too bogged down on infrastructure stuff, my work is predominantly on trying to generate OSV records for relevant open source related CVEs. And so I'm sort of now getting into the rabbit hole of CVE data quality, and
good luck
trying to engage with the CVE quality working group now, and also with the we're using the NBD as our source of truth. So I'm engaging with both the NBD folks and trying to engage with the quality working group and potentially the automation working group of CVE as well.
Nice.
And just overnight made some progress on gaining access to those working groups. So.
Okay. So one area I think we can immediately assist with is a member of the CVE board is one of my peers at work. Another member is an active participant in many of the working groups. So Art Mannion, Katie Noble's my coworker, Chandan is an industry friend. So we have a lot of connections. So if we needed to broker conversations, I'm glad to help facilitate some of that and try to help kind of remove some blockers for you guys and connectivity.
I'm hopeful. I say this from complete ignorance and naivety as to how these operate, but I'm hopeful that if we just start showing up in some of these pre-existing forums, that rather than needing to have a whole web of private dialogue going on sort of separate from them, we can just do things in those working group sessions. That's right. My hope. But it's good to know that there's some back channels that we can also leverage.
Or if you're blocked on something, I can go poke them and say, hey, can you be more responsive, or can we set up a special public or private call, whatever. We have that ability. We have a lot of different ways to, and especially from like an industry perspective, we know just about everybody on the board, and we can make things happen if we need to help facilitate communication. And then in my experience with them is that they're generally very reasonable folks. They're trying to do the right thing, but it's a very hard problem to keep trying to solve, which is why we have things like OSV and GSD kind of helping pop up and trying to help cover gaps.
Yeah, I was also kind of curious if there are any other members of this working group who might be interested in collaborating with us on this front. This idea of just improving data quality at the source, at CVE's level, because that's something that we are really trying to address, and I'm sure this is something that a lot of people have run into in the past.
And so like talking about like the OSS cert, we're looking at potentially creating or highlighting tools so that maintainers and projects can have a more frictionless advisory experience, so that it's very simple for them, very automated as much as possible. And then we want to plug in additional things like potentially we're in talks right now with OpenVex. So the group might adopt that as a project, software project, and then we become evangelists. And how great would that be? Is, you know, as a developer is fixing a bug, they could also, you know, have the advisory created and then have a Vex advisory spit out saying we're not affected, or here is how things are affected, and just kind of have that be automated and have that all have downstream be able to consume that. So that's kind of some of our goals, is to try to help maintainers get them access to tools and standards, so it's just part of their pipeline, and they don't have to do a lot of additional work.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of overlap with OSV on that front as well. Like we were about helping we want the data format to be useful for downstream consumers and enable tooling. Like we're definitely also looking at OpenVex and potentially, you know, automatically generating AutoVex based on, say, static analysis and things like that, using OSV as well. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of places that I think we should definitely be talking more on.
Yeah, and to the data quality problem, it's definitely of concern to everyone that participates in the group, and I think we should be able to potentially get you some, you know, contributors to help kind of talk about and hopefully code our way out of some of these problems.
Yeah, there's most of the, because my primary data source is the NVD. Most of the data quality issues I'm seeing at the moment are between their CPE strings and their CPE dictionary. So we're having another chat with them next week, and I'm hopeful that, you know, well, I just want to learn more about what their processes look like, because from where I'm sitting looking at the data sort of in aggregate, it looks like they're just not doing any referential integrity checks between the dictionary and the CVE records when they go slapping CPE strings on them. But I don't know what I don't know, right? So there's more conversations need to be had there. The other angle that I've noticed some issues, which I've been directed to talk to the CVE folks directly, is when I've been analyzing the CPE dictionary, some of the reference description strings apparently come directly from CVE. Yeah, and they're completely inconsistent, right? And so I got directed to the quality working group regarding that, because I sort of started to try and have a similar dialogue to what I was having with the MBD with CVE directly, and that kind of was a bit more random, I guess. And so and then I learned about the quality working group, and was sort of, when I kicked something that had died over the holiday period, they kind of directed me there as well. So I believe I'm all plugged in now to attend the next meeting of that, which I think is 2 weeks time. So I'm going to show up at that one and talk about my findings and see what the go is.
Yeah, CPE is an interesting problem. Before I came to Intel, I was with Red Hat Product Security. So I was personally responsible for the CPEs of all the products that Red Hat produced. And I agree that it's especially, and then when you like move into open source where there isn't a vendor necessarily associated, right. CPE is a kind of an alien concept to a maintainer. And I think there's potentially a lot of value that if we get the right folks together and again, figure out a way to do this through automation, we potentially could provide a solution so that a maintainer can have some type of unique identifier that is able to be consistently used as it moves its way downstream.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I was reading somewhere, Dan Lawrence from ChainGuard did an article today, and it was really insightful, where he was trying to dig into some NPM widespread CVE, and basically kind of boiled down to like the part of the problem was the CPE out of like all of the required data fields, almost all of them were wildcards. It was all star. And he's like, well, this is completely effing useless.
Yeah, I'm not even bothering to use it for versioning purposes. I'm at this stage trying to just get enough signal around whether something is open source or not. right? And the way that I'm doing that currently is, are there any known repository shaped URLs that relate to this software? And you know, the CPU dictionary is a great source of that metadata when it's in good shape. And where I was finding these referential integrity issues was it had a CVE record with a CPE string that wasn't in the dictionary, right? So I couldn't then go and look up any associated metadata in the dictionary because it wasn't there. And I'm like, well, procedurally, I just assumed that when you're slapping a CPE string on a CVE record, that it winds up in the dictionary, and that doesn't seem to be the case, right? So that was the first problem I was finding. The second problem was just, you know, ambiguous or duplicate but different CPE strings for the same thing. And again, that said to me on first principles that it was a referential integrity issue between the CVEs and the dictionary. So
yeah, I think I can get quite a community around talking about this particular problem, and we can kind of chew through how we might be able to solve, or at least figure out who we need to talk to influence.
Yeah, we've been able to, you know, because I started reporting them sort of ad hoc as I encountered them during my conversion work. I started reporting them to the MBD, and then eventually I got a human contact out of that, and that's how we sort of leveraged to having a dialogue with them directly. And so we're currently, I think, having a chat every 4 weeks or so. We're only up to our second one next week, with holidays and whatnot. But yeah, the questions I plan on asking them at the next one is I just want to learn a little bit better about what their process currently looks like, because, you know, from where I'm sitting, it looks like it's just a case of doing a referential integrity check, and I'm sure there's good reasons why that's not the case, and I'd just like to learn a bit more about it. So.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity. We can collaborate and then even potentially evangelize as we are able to. We're trying to develop a strategy on how we get more mind share with open source maintainers. So potentially, you know, stating, you know, hey, OSV is a great methodology that you can help make things better. So we potentially can help do some advocacy to help for that standardization.
Yeah. The other thing I'm interested to understand is how the CV 5.0 format will flow down into the NVD, because in some ways that addresses this whole CPE problem, because we can use package identifiers and whatnot. But that's obviously a big change to the way the NVD operates, and that only helps with open source related CVEs, not, you know, that they have a bigger universe to deal with than just open source. So
they do.
Yeah.
Indeed. There you are. Well, is there anything else I could answer for you? What questions do you have? You
know, I don't think I have any more questions. Me personally, have any more questions? Yeah, like I'm going to have to learn the ropes of this working group and where we can add value and mutual value and whatnot.
And don't hesitate to, you know, think through if there are specific things the working group can do to assist you. You know, let us know, and we'll be glad to try to help facilitate that.
Cool.
Well, we're at last time I had 2 folks show up. This time I've got 2 folks show up. Maybe next month we'll have 4. I'll be excited to get some more perspectives.
Yeah, I noticed, yeah, as I said, I only learned about the Slack channel for this earlier this week, and there's like 400 odd people in there, but you're saying that the actual attendance of these meetings is pretty small.
Like with our OpenVex calls, we've had 20 folks on those. But we'll generally kind of average around a dozen, 15 or so people on a call.
Okay.
This one where we're just kind of kicking off, trying to get into this time zone, I need to kind of get the word out. I thought my former colleagues at Red Hat Product Security were going to show up, Garth and Wade and everybody, but they ditched me. So I'm going to have to send them a nasty gram. They abandoned me. But I'm trying to get more people. And we had a gentleman from Japan last time, and he was really excited. So again, I think it's just we're starting to build this segment of the community and figuring out ways we can share information more easily and be better collaborative.
Very cool. Okay.
All right. Well, if neither of you have anything else, I'll let you guys go. I appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward to our continued work together.
Probably to put a face to a name.
Indeed. All right. Well, we'll talk to you very soon. Enjoy the rest of your night or day. Sorry, morning. It's morning for you fellas.
Have a good night.
Cheers.
Bye.